Okay, hi everybody. This is Carol from Segovia Quilts, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about sewing with jean material, and I'm going to show you guys a quilt that I've been working on for, well, I started it last year, and I work on it periodically when I'm not, either doing quilts for clients or doing other quilts that I'm working on. The video that I posted showing how to do the two cool t-shirt quilt, a couple of people, asked me for different ideas on quilts that they were, going to try and do themselves. And one lady asked me if you could put jean material into a t-shirt quilt. And so that question is kind of prompting me to do this video. And the answer is yes, you can use jean material in a t-shirt quilt. There are some things you might want to consider before putting the jean material in, and that is that jean fabric tends to be thicker or heavier than t-shirt fabric. It could make the quilt a little bit warmer than if it was just plain t-shirts throughout the quilt. So that's something to keep in mind. Something else to think about is because the fabric is thicker, you might want to consider increasing your seam allowance from the standard 1/4 inch to maybe 3/8 inch or even all the way up to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You don't have to, but it might be good just because when you set your seam and then you fold or you iron the seam, you kind of iron it back or iron it open if you like, doing your seams like that. Because the fabric is so thick, it might be a little difficult to actually get the jean fabric to lay nice and flat. So if you make the seam allowance a little bit bigger, it might be easier to get it to lay flat. Also, you might want to think about fraying. Some jean fabric can fray really easily. And if you have a short 1/4 inch seam allowance, I don't know that it's a guarantee it would happen, but it could potentially fray to the extent of that it'll actually open up a hole in your quilt. I'm not saying it will happen, but it could happen. So something else to consider when you're cutting out your jean fabric, maybe use pinking shears instead of, just a straight rotary cutter or a straight pair of scissors. Use a pinking shear. And if you don't know what pinking looks like, let me show you. I have some pre-cuts here. This particular pre-cut is by Wyndham Fabrics, but let's see if I can't zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay. You see how this edge right here is ziggy-zaggy? This is pinking. This is what pinking looks like. And what pinking does is it actually helps prevent fraying. So, the pre-cut here, these are all raw edges, but even though I'm messing with it, it's not starting to fray and open up. And that's because of this particular cut. So you could do that to your blocks and whatnot to prevent it from potentially unraveling in your quilt. But onto the quilt that I'm working on. The quilt that you see here in front of you, it's not complete, but this is a jean circle quilt that I have been working on. Like I said, I started it last year, and I work on it, I don't know, maybe every 8 months or so, it seems like. So I'll just kind of show you guys briefly what I did. I had bought a bag of jeans from a lady on Craigslist, like I said, about 1.5 years ago. And the initial intention was just so I could have some junky old jeans to wear around the house or if I'm working outside or something. And of the jeans that were in there, I think I only ended up keeping 1 pair because the other ones just didn't fit the way I preferred. So instead of throwing them away, what I did was I actually cut out circles from them, and that's what those are back here. Now, when I did it, this is just a regular old holiday cookie tin, and it measures, let me see here. This measures, it's just, let's see, we got 6 5/8 inches. So, so I just used this. I put it on the pair of jeans. I used a marking utensil and I drew around it, and then I cut them out. yeah, and that's what those piles are back there. I actually was able to do two sizes. So those are the large size. And then I was able to cut out some smaller ones. And these measure, these are about 5 3/4. So they're just a little bit smaller than the larger ones. And I forget what I used to make this circle. It wasn't the same tin. It might have been a bowl or something, I don't know. But, so what I'm doing is, I'm sewing them together, and the way that I'm going to do it is, this is essentially the seam allowance right here. Let me zoom in a little bit. Hang on. A little bit more. There we go. Okay, so this right here is essentially the seam allowance once you sew the circles together. When I sew them together, they make a little block, and you can see my pink line here is my marking line, so I could get, you know, relatively good squares. So this is my square, but you can see my circle. So then what I do, or what you do, is you iron the seams open, and the idea is to put fabric inside of it. So let me, zoom back out and show y'all that. So now I have a couple of containers of just miscellaneous blocks. Now these were all different sizes, so I had to cut them down to the size that I needed. But it's just all different fabrics. No fabric in here is duplicate. So I went through and I picked out all different fabrics. And what I'm going to do is I will put a square of fabric inside each little circle. There you go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch along the edges of each of these little half circles. And so you can kind of get an idea of what the finished quilt will look like. Go like that. And like I said, none of these fabrics are duplicate. I wanted it to have a really scrappy feel to it. So that's, whoops, sorry. So I just picked out all sorts of different random fabrics. There you go. Alright, there. So you guys can kind of get the idea of what it's going to look like once I finish putting this together. I mean, look at that. That's just really scrappy, but it's still really nice. There. So now, if you look online, there's not very many videos out there showing you how to do a jean circle quilt. I know, because I looked. But the ones that are out there, everybody else that's out there, on their circles, they put a square of batting in each one, and then they put their material on top. Now, I'm not going to do that, just because, like I said earlier, I think the jean fabric it's pretty thick. It's going to be heavy. I don't necessarily think you need batting. If you want batting, by all means go ahead. What that'll do is that'll give you kind of a puffier look, or a fuller look. But I'm going to opt out of doing the batting. I don't want to add it in there, so I'm not going to. But I'll show you guys the back. So what I did was I had wanted to do the quilt in a way where I could almost make it spiral. So I started to try and do it. So you can kind of see here is a dark square, and then I wanted it to spiral out like this type thing. You can kind of get the idea. And obviously I'm not done yet, so you can't really tell. And I don't know if it's going to quite work out the way I want it to, just because, you know, some of these jean squares here aren't like as dark as these squares, so I don't know if it'll get the effect that I was hoping for, but yeah, but you can kind of see what I was trying to do. And even the back, you know, I mean, even if it doesn't work out the way I wanted it to, I mean, it still looks just kind of scrappy, which would go really good with the theme on the front. So, turn that around. But, so I just wanted to show you guys a quick video. I'll show y'all a couple of minutes here of me sewing these together. I got this bottom row here, and I pinned them in place, and then I made a little line here using this nifty little tool. Now I have no idea what it's called, and I didn't look it up, but it just has this little rolling wheel. It's got little spikes on it, and when you roll it across the material and you push down hard, it leaves a mark. And so that's what I did here. I don't know, let me see if I can zoom in and show you in case you've never used one before. There we go. Okay, you can really see it good on this square right here. There. So this is just the line. It's almost like a perforation, except it's, you know, you're not going to be able to rip it apart. So it just creates a little perforation for you to follow. And on this side I have the pink line, but on this side I didn't. But not all of my circles have the lines on it. So that's where this little perforation is going to come in handy. So let me go ahead and move this over to the sewing machine, and I'll show you guys me sewing this row together. Okay, so I've got my sewing machine set up and ready to go. And real quick, I just wanted to show y'all the pinning that I did on this. So obviously I pinned right here on the tops. There we go. Oops. So I pinned on the front, but then what I did is I also pinned on the back. So, whoop, you can't see that. There you go. So I just put a couple of pins here on the sides, and I did that just to keep everything down so it doesn't accidentally get under my needle and presser foot. And I just kind of laid it out flat. I lined everything up. I lined up this edge and this edge, and then I just kind of checked over here just to make sure my circle was lined up with the block underneath, and then I just pinned the edges, and I did that with all of them. So go ahead and flip this over. Now let me zoom in so you guys can see the sewing action. There we go. Alright, so my sewing machine is set to standard settings. I have my stitch length at a 2.5, and I'm actually using jean colored thread. It is, let's see, Coates and Clark Art 276, and it's denim cotton dual duty plus thread. Now I have that in my spool and in my bobbin. And I just did that just so it would kind of blend in with the jean fabric, you know, in case you end up seeing my stitching. I just wanted it to be, you know, relatively invisible. So I'm just doing a straight stitch, and you don't need to backstitch at the beginning or the end, because you're actually going to be folding this over, and it's going to kind of encase your stitches. And then we'll also be doing a stitch on the outside, and I'll show you guys that here in a little bit. So we'll just go ahead and start going. And I know you guys can't see it in the camera, but I'm just following that perforation mark that I made with my little tool earlier. And that just ensures that I have a nice straight line from each intersection to the next. There you go. And once you come to the little intersection right here, you just sew straight on through. There's no need to stop and pick up your presser foot. You just go right on into the next little circle. And this goes together rather quickly, actually. Well, sewing it together goes rather quickly. The cutting of the circles took me, I think about 2 days. I did it on the weekend, so Saturday, all day Saturday and all day Sunday, I was cutting out circles. And I was using, well, I was going back and forth between a pair of scissors and my rotary cutter. There are, let me get this needle out of the way. There we go. There is a tool, I want to say it's called a compass, and it's kind of like the same thing, the compass that you used in school. It has a little point that goes down, and instead of drawing a circle on the end, it'll actually cut it. It has a tiny little rotary blade on it, and it'll cut the circle out for you. So it's really, really cool. I don't have one. So yeah, so when I was cutting out my circles, like I said, I was going back and forth between a pair of scissors and my rotary cutter. Alright, there you go, one more. Okay. Give that a cut. Alright, so let me get these needles out of here. And then I'll take you guys over to the ironing board, and show y'all how I press those seams open. What you don't want to have happen is you don't want the feed dogs to maybe miss the fabric, and what'll happen is it'll start feeding into here. So when you're sewing this seam, this edge right here will be folded over, and you'll end up having to rip your stitch out. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. Okay, so now let me zoom out a little bit. Oops. Okay, there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sew our seams, or our seam allowance, open. Okay, so all I did was I flipped these out, so now they are sticking out. So you can see this is our next row, and I think it looks pretty good. So I'm just folding that over. So now you just hold these little flaps open. You just put a nice hot iron right on top of them. And I do have my steam on, so that'll help keep those open really good. And you just want to press it open, and you know, it's jean fabric, so it is going to be thick and tough, and you're going to have to wiggle it this way and that if you've never worked with jean fabric before. There we go, we're on the last one. Alright, look at that. Doesn't that look great, guys? Right. Put that over there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have to sew these together. And once we sew these together, it'll close up this little gap here. It'll close it up nicely. So, if I can kind of show y'all, you kind of get the idea. It'll close this up, and it'll do that for all of them. Because you'll see once, you know, like right now, you can see there's a little gap right in here. Let me see if I can't show y'all. Tilt you down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so you see there's a gap here, but it's because this is loose and this is loose. So, right in there. But, once you line these up and put a pin in it and sew it, your stitch is going to come all the way right into here. It's a little difficult to show it without it actually being sewn, but the stitch will come right in here and it'll close this up really good. And it'll be like that for each little section. Okay, so we'll zoom back out. There. Alright, so, but what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go ahead and start sewing in some fabric squares into each of my little circles. And I'm going to try doing it with a double needle. So, I don't know how it's going to look, but I hope it'll look cool. So yeah, so I'm going to get my double needle on. I'm going to go ahead and move this back to my table, and I'll show you guys what I'm planning on doing. Okay, so I was pinning in the little squares that I'm going to be sewing in there, but I was getting ready to sew these together at the same time, and I was thinking y'all might not know how to sew these together, so I figured I'd go ahead and show y'all how to do that. So I'm sure there's a bunch of ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you how I do it. So we already sewed this right here down, so to find out where we need to end our stitch line on these sections, what I do is I just flatten out my circle. I kind of give it a little tug just to make sure it's laying nice and flat. I do that to all of them. And then what I did was I took a little marking tool and I marked the intersections on each one. See, it's under there and there. I just marked where they intersect. And then I got my ruler and I got my nifty little wheelie roll again. And all I'm doing is I'm putting my ruler on this seam line right here, and then I'm lining it up down here where they intersect. And then I'm just making my mark. And you gotta push really hard to make sure it gets down to the bottom one. And you can check by just picking it up. I can see mine, but if it didn't go through, just flip them. Make sure they're still nice and flat. Line it up again. And then go ahead and mark it again. There we go. And then you can check to make sure there's not two lines. See, I'm good on that one. And then I'm going to do that for these, but then all you do is you put them together, put those little mark lines together, line it up on the end over here, and then you can put a pin right in here. There we go. And then all I'm going to do is take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew right down this little marking line that I made. I'm going to do that for all the little sections. So we'll go ahead and pin this section over here. Just want to line it up. There we go. Get another pin. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll sew right down this one. I'll go ahead and mark these. There we go. And like I said, I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. This is just kind of what I found to be the easiest for me. So, you know, do whatever's going to be easiest for you. If you'd prefer to measure out your squares to make them exactly the same, because I'll tell you right now, all of these squares are not the same. I know because when I was cutting out the squares of material that I'm going to put in the middle, I measured a couple of squares using the back, and some of them were about 1/4 of an inch off or so. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not perfect. And honestly, I'm all right with that because this is just going to be a quilt here at home. Probably, you know, for my stepson to use or his friends when they spend the night, whatever. It's jean material, so it'll be able to hold up really well to, you know, wear and tear and teenage boys. So I'm not too concerned about it. But yeah, so if you want to measure it out, go ahead. If you're going to do that, definitely start from the beginning so you can make sure everything is nice and the same. Alright. And again, this is the first time I've ever made this quilt. I've seen pictures of it and I was like, man, that's really cool. I just really like the way, it's almost like a cathedral window type thing. Or I guess it could be actually, I'm not positive. I don't really know all the terminology. But I really liked it, so I figured, why not? I'll give it a try. There you go. I'm just lining that up. Oops. There. Alright, so I've got all my little sections pinned here. So, I'm going to go ahead and sew these together. And then when I come back, I'll show you guys how I'm going to sew in the little colored blocks. Okay, so I went ahead and ironed these seams open, and so now I'm going to go ahead and put some colored blocks inside of these 3 blocks. Now, I'm not doing the outside row right now because you need to have all 4 sides ready to be sewn down, and since these only have 3 sides, and in this case 2 sides are ready, you can't put your block in yet. And I'm doing it kind of in sections because I'm using a decorative stitch, and the sewing machine that I have that allows me to do decorative stitches is not big enough for me to put all of the jean pieces together and then sew in the colored block. So I'm kind of doing it in sections. So let's go ahead and put blocks in these 3 right here. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not duplicating any prints here. So it'll be really, really scrappy, and I'm really excited to see the finished product. So to put your block in, you just kind of fold open all 4 of these and just place it in the middle. There you go. And then you just tuck it back down, make sure your placement's good. And this one's good, so I'm going to go ahead and pin it. I can't get it to go in there. There we go. Okay. Yeah, let's see. I'm just kind of looking through my stack here, just looking for another block that the colors really aren't the same or similar to anything around it. Oops. There. Beautiful, I love it. And this is a really good way to kind of do like a stash buster too. Like if you have a bunch of jean fabric, but you also have a bunch of, you know, just random pieces, definitely give this a try. It's just kind of really fun. Let's see, we'll put in a pink. There we go. Got a little strand there. Okay. And this is the last one. Get that strand out. Alright. There. Okay. So those are the 9 blocks that we can go ahead and sew together. You can see all 9 of them there. So let me move my stack of blocks on this side, and then we'll go ahead and move it to the sewing machine. Now, I changed my mind. I'm not going to use a double needle, but I will show you what I was going to try to do. So this is my scrap piece of material that I try out all my stitches on. Zoom in if I can't get it to focus. Come on. Alright, well that's good. Okay, so this straight stitch here in the middle was a testing stitch that I had done, but I pretended this was my the curved piece of my jean part of my quilt. And so I was originally going to do a zigzag stitch going back and forth because I really like how it looks in the back. But it just wasn't looking the way I was hoping it would look. Super stop. And then here's the back. So I wasn't really happy with how that looks, so I'm just going to do a straight zigzag, just a single one, and this is kind of what it'll look like here. I'm going to increase my, not my stitch length, but I guess the width of it. It's usually a 3.5. I'm going to do a 4. This is 3.5 and this is a 4, so it's just a little bit bigger. And I like how this looks a little bit better in the back. I like that you can see the white and the red, and I'm going to be using red on mine because I really like how red looks with jean fabric. So I might adjust my tension just a little bit so I see a little bit more red and a little less white. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do the double stitch after all. So yeah, so let me get this moved over to the sewing machine and I'll show you guys the next section. Okay, so I've got it set up, and like I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing a zigzag stitch over my little half circles here. I think it'll look really, really good. So I'm going to go ahead and do a locking stitch at the front, or at the beginning, which is just, you go forward a couple of stitches, and then you go backward and then forward again. So, there we go. Going backwards and forwards. want to make sure everything's still nice and flat. We're coming to the end. I'm going to do back stitch to lock that seam in. There we go. Put that in the bottom, if I can find it. I'll cut it there. Okay, so now let me scooch this over and adjust the camera so you guys can see the stitch that we just did. Okay, so looks like I'll have to pick it up for you. No biggie. Okay, so let me adjust the camera. Oh, there it was. Of course, my camera's being difficult. Alright, okay, so there is the zigzag stitch that we just did. See? I think it looks beautiful. I think it's really fun and just kind of different, you know. Now, you could, instead of stopping here, you could just keep going down to the next one. Like, you could do almost like a figure 8 kind of thing, but just not the whole 8, half 8. So, you know, you could start here, come up, and then go down, and then back up. I didn't. I just, you know, I did it right here so I could show you guys. Let me show you the back. So this is what the back's going to look like. I really like how that looks because you mostly see the red, but then you have that little pop of white on the edges. It's just kind of, it's unexpected, you know. I just really like how that looks. And so it's going to look like that. You know, you're going to have it on both or on all the sides. I think that'll look really, really neat, especially with the darker jean. Yeah. Alright, so yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm going to be doing. Like I said, I just wanted to do a quick little video. I mean, I'm sure it's not quick. It's definitely quicker than my tutorial on how to do the Too Cool t-shirt quilt, but just a quick little video showing that, you know, there's a bunch of different options you can do with jean fabric, and you can put it in a memory quilt. Then you can also do something like this. Now, I would recommend with a quilt like this with jeans, when you wash it, definitely wash it in cold water, and I would also recommend adding in those color catching sheets, because if you've ever done just a load of jeans but there was a sock hiding in one of the pant legs and you saw that sock turn blue, you could potentially get some, you know, fading of some of your lighter colored blocks, and it could affect, you know, any white spots or spots in your blocks. So yeah, definitely throw in a color catching sheet. But other than that, I mean, jean fabric is really, really versatile. So, you know, go dig around in your stash, find that jean fabric, and do something fun with it. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comments section. If you want to message me on Facebook, go ahead and do that. You can find me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Segovia Quilts. And yeah, other than that, I guess I will see you guys later.